Hello all, this is Barbara Mann from Your Empowered You, and welcome to part 3 of our leadership coaching video series where we're going to talk about success with managing managers. So this is when you are in charge of an entire operation, you've got managers under you now, you've got individual contributors, and you're really in charge of the whole entire office. So this is what this video is geared for. And if you recall, in part 1, we talked about what makes a great leader, like some of the motivators, some of the traits of what makes a great leader, whether you're a new manager or managing managers. We talked about some of the items that made great leaders. In part 2, we talked about being a successful new manager. So this was geared towards managers who were perhaps an individual contributor and they just became a new manager, or say they were relatively new to management. And now in part 3, we're going to be talking about the next level up, which is managing managers. You're in charge of the whole entire operation. So you don't just have the managers, you have your individual contributors, you have everything. So you're managing the whole operation. Personally, that's where I spent the vast majority of my management years, about 15 years, overseeing a variety of different operations across the country and in Canada. One of my favorite roles. I loved it, loved it, loved it. So this is really what I like talking about, is managing managers in your operation. So similar to the last video, and there are going to be some similarities between video 2 and video 3 on what we're going to discuss. It's just a little bit different take on some of those similarities. And then we'll be talking about things that are completely different when you're managing managers in an operation from, say, a new manager role. So the first question that you ask yourself is, what's your motivator? Is it money? Is it title? Because some people are driven by title. Is your motivator developing others? Is it loving to be, totally accountable for the whole entire operation and making decisions and setting the strategy and all those things? Your role, there's some similarities between the video 2 and what we'll be talking about, but some of the main traits of the role of managing an operation is you're developing your team, you're developing your managers, or succession planning, you're developing your individual contributors, like you're developing the whole operation and keeping them engaged and really setting the tone for the office. You're leading the entire operation now to meet and exceed expectations as a whole. So it isn't just meeting, for your team, for your direct group, like individual contributors, it's the whole operation. So it's just going up to the next level. You're still there to support people, provide the necessary tools for people's success. So that's obviously similar to a new manager role. You're still accountable, but now you're accountable for the whole entire operation, not just your team. It's the whole entire operation. So there's a lot of responsibility that goes into when you're managing in that capacity. But the biggest change between being a new manager and managing managers is you're really there to see the big picture, set some strategy, set the vision, influence people, have people see that vision come to life. And so, you're thinking about where your operation is going to be going in 2 months from now, and kind of building it so that it marches towards that big picture, big vision that you have. And you're really understanding how everything is intertwined, like between the departments and between different offices, and how it's sort of all relating to one another, because we're going to talk about this, you're going to need to understand all of those spokes in a wheel, so that if you set a vision or a strategy, you need to understand the impacts to other departments, other offices. So some of the similarities from video 2 that I'm not going to dive deeply into some of those similarities. Some of them we are, though. But effective communication, that is a given no matter what role you're in, whether you're an individual contributor or manager, managing manager, or CEO. Recognition and motivators. Again, that's something we talked about in video 2. Is definitely applicable for managing an operation. You need to recognize people. What are people's motivators? They're motivated by different things, and understanding that. You got to trust your managers now. In the last video, we talked about trusting your individual contributor group. Now it's about, trusting the managers and your individual contributors to make those decisions. Another similarity with video too is performance management. So you're going to have to do performance management when you're managing managers. You're probably going to be involved with some of the individual contributor performance management issues, but that's the same as well. Performance reviews, regular meetings, that's all the same when you're managing managers. You want to make sure that you meet with your managers just like they're meeting with their people. Having regular meetings, this is really about developing the managers and hearing what's on their mind. Change management, that's a big one, obviously. Any management role that you're in is having an effective change management plan, understanding the impact, not just with your operation, but with other departments. Other similarities, you be yourself. We're going to talk about some of these things in greater depth because it's a little bit different when you're managing managers. But being yourself is very important. Being accountable. Yes, you are accountable, just in a much bigger capacity. And then having a solid relationship with your direct manager. So that's no different than when you're a new manager. You really, really want to be able to manage up, manage sideways, and manage down not the same way, but you want it to be healthy relationships, whether it's up, sideways, or down. It's pretty darn important, very important. So the number one trait, talked about this in video 2, effective communication. But as you go higher in an organization, this becomes so darn critical. The relationships are key, and they rely on effective communication, not just with your managers, but with your entire staff, with other departments, with everybody. So being open and honest and transparent becomes even more important as you go higher up. You want, that to be communicating everything that you can. There's some things that you're not going to be able to, obviously, but when you can, make sure that you're delivering the message, openly and honestly and transparently as possible. You want to be clear and concise. When you are managing a whole operation, don't assume everyone is clear. That is number one, problem, is that you're assuming everybody is clear on what you're trying to communicate. And I guarantee you there's going to be someone who's not hearing it, how you are communicating it. Maybe you're unclear of it, or maybe, people process information differently. So make sure it's clear, concise, reiterated, ask questions to make sure people are clear on what you're communicating and circle back. The higher up that you go, being a great listener becomes much more important than, say, if you're at the lower levels of management. But being a great listener becomes really important because you start really understanding the operation, the pulse. People are coming up with great ideas, and you're able to listen to this. You can just get the feel for the operation. When you're a great listener, you're listening to other departments, what their needs are. You're listening to maybe the C execs, what they need. But listening and being present becomes really, really important the higher up that you get. And part of listening is that you're going to have nonverbal expression. So communication is verbal and nonverbal. So your facial expressions, just smiling, a scowl, all these things become even more important. So if you're scowling all day, you're going to set the tone for the operation. They're going to be uptight. But if you're smiling and you're communicating nonverbally about being positive, your people pick up on this. You're setting the tone, the personality for your operation from verbal and nonverbal communication. And part of effective communication in the nonverbal is you staying calm, even when there is the wheels are falling off. And I'm sure every manager has felt that way at one time or another. When the wheels are falling off your operation and you're feeling uptight inside, you don't want everyone knowing that. Now, do you want people knowing that maybe there's a serious situation? Yes, you do. But the way that you sort of handle yourself, they're looking at you. If you're handling it calmly and you have a plan, people are cool with that. But if you're, either verbal or non-verbally communicating stress and, oh my gosh, it's not healthy for your team members. They're going to pick up on that. Okay, so staying calm is part of communication. One of the big things that's different, though, from a new manager and managing a direct report group and managing an operation is strategy. You're really providing now the strategy, the big picture for the operation. You need to be able to articulate that to your team. Like, what does that look like, for the group? Because people want to know, what's the strategy going to look like? What's the big picture? How is this impacting me? So these are what's going through, everybody's head, right? So your job is the manager of an operation, their job is to provide the vision, maybe some criteria. But one of the key things is allow your team to sort of design that path. The more that they can be involved in having that sort of vision come to life, and being involved in building that, the more buy-in you get. So the manager of the operation creates the vision, some loose, criteria, some outline of it. But the more that we allow others to participate it and create it, the better. Another item under the strategy is understanding your necessary resources that are needed for this strategy. Who are the people involved? Is it in your own operation? Who's all involved in your own operation? In other departments? What technology may be needed? Understanding like everything that is needed for a strategy before doing and rolling things out is critical. Understanding those collateral sources and who's impacted. Your own operation, different departments, different offices, but understanding all these impacts that go on when, say, you set a strategy. How's it impacting the big picture operation? And then being able to communicate this vision and the path to the entire operation so they see it. They kind of have an idea where it's going. Now, you may not have all the answers, and that's okay. So as a leader, one of the key things, even if you're a new manager or managing a manager, you may not have all the answers, and that's okay. But once you do get the answers, you provide those updates as quickly and openly and honestly and transparently as possible. So you don't need to know every single thing about the path or how we're going to get to that vision, but make sure that you reiterate and provide those updates with your team. So we talked a little bit about collaboration, but that becomes a super biggie when you're managing the operation is collaboration. Collaborating with your managers, collaborating with other departments, collaborating with different offices. So the more people that you understand impacts and you get buy-in and you're working together, the more that you're working towards sort of the common good of the entire organization. So again, the higher up that you go, you're thinking about your operation, but also the entire operation, the entire organization that you may be working for. So collaboration with other managers is imperative. And again, not just your direct report groups, but managers in different departments and different offices, so that you're all sort of working together instead of working against each other becomes really important at this level. So another key difference with the new manager and managing an operation is you're really in charge of, understanding the workloads of your staff. What are the staffing needs? The HR issues that come up. These are big ticket items that when you're managing the operation, you really have to get a good feel for what's going on. So what's your need? Do you have enough staff for your workload? Is the workload too much? Is it too low? What are the future staffing issues? So are people going to be promoted here pretty darn soon? Are there lateral changes going on? Do you have a retention issue? If so, why? You need to dive into that. But being proactive on staffing issues is key, because if you lose people, what the other people want to know is what in the heck are you doing about it? So I highly recommend is that you're constantly interviewing people so that if you have, say, an unexpected staffing issue, you're taking care of it right now and you have somebody that you could hire tomorrow. To be more proactive, the more proactive you can be and ahead of the game, the better it is for your operation. Now, if you have a bad retention issue, that's a whole nother issue that we could do a whole nother video on retention. But if it's just, your normal retention, you still need to be very proactive because, again, your staff wants to know, oh man, now we're short-staffed. How is this impacting me? What are you doing about it? So make sure that you can say, oh, we've been actively interviewing. We know who the next person is coming in, and everyone stays calm. They know it's still going to be a workload issue because you can't just get someone in and have them be fully competent in a week, but it eases their minds. They want to know what the plan is. Do you have an even distribution of work? Is there any imbalance? Why? So make sure you understand these things because you don't want people to think that it's unfair or it's imbalanced. So really understanding what that workload is for each person and making sure it's fair and balanced is critical. Human resource issues. Do you have human resources? What's happening with that? Obviously, you want to keep those kinds of issues as limited as possible, but they're going to creep up. They're going to come up. It's just a matter of time, and obviously you want to make sure they're handled appropriately and fairly, and you have human resources involved whenever you need. And then you also need to think about, succession planning. Who's going to be taking your spot? Who are you developing for other type of higher management roles? What individual contributors may be moving into other management positions? So succession planning, developing managers, developing your staff is pretty darn important because you want to keep, moving people, keeping them engaged. If they want to stay put, that's fine. You still want to keep people engaged. But if you have people who want to move around, you have a responsibility to make sure that you're helping them with what those career aspirations might look like. Another main piece of being managing an operation is understanding, what process improvements do you need, and understanding the root issues. So what I've seen a lot of managers do is they try to put a Band-Aid on issues, but they don't get to the root of the problem. And you can put Band-Aid on here and Band-Aid on there and Band-Aid on there, but it gets really darn clunky. So what a good manager does is they understand what's the root cause of this issue, and they get to the root and they fix the root. But understanding, when you make a process improvement and you get to the root, is there an impact to other departments? Are there other impacts? That's important because if you change something in your own department, how is that impacting others? How is it impacting employees? How is it impacting customers? So understanding those impacts when you make those process improvements is important. And you really want to obtain, when you're doing process improvements, really obtaining feedback and suggestions from your employees, from your managers, from other departments. It's important because they have, number one, great ideas, okay, and they may be able to tell you, if we do this, this is what's going to happen. Because as a manager over an operation, you're not doing the actual individual contributor work. So you may have missed how it may impact, say, other employees or customers. So it's important to get the feedback and suggestions from your entire operation to come up with the best solution. And if you incorporate the frontline suggestions, think about that buy-in that you have from the front line. The more that you incorporate their ideas, the better. Understanding your metrics and data analysis is pretty darn important. And this is something that I've seen managers of operations kind of go from one metric to another, and they're just trying to hit numbers because everybody is accountable to meet expectations. That's what a manager does. They have goals and objectives that they need to meet for their operation, so they have certain metrics they need to meet, and I totally understand that. But sometimes it feels like managers can just chase numbers. It's really important to understand how your data is collected. I can't stress this enough because we assume we know how the data is collected until we ask questions. So we've got to make sure what's incorporated, what's included in that data, what's not, what are these parameters. You'd be surprised that when you ask questions, maybe certain things aren't included in that data, and you're assuming that it is. I have had that happen numerous times. The reason I'm bringing this up is because my own personal experience, I had it happen to me where it looked like we were not meeting a certain expectation. And when I started diving into the data, lo and behold, not only were we pretty darn good, but what happened was we discovered how the data was collected, and a lot of other operations were negatively impacted. So it actually didn't help all the operations, but what was good about that exercise, we all knew how the data was finally collected. So that was important for the entire operation, not just mine, but the entire organization. Understand your metrics. How is each metric impacting one another? And this is what happens when, if you put band-aids on one, maybe you fix this one, but you don't understand the impact on another, and then this one goes kind of unbalanced and wacky. Understanding how everything is impacting one another is very important. And what I always tried to look for, and my managers tried to look for, is, how can we change one little item that positively impacts several metrics at once? Now, that's not always easy to do, I get it, but if you figure that out, like the root issue and how it positively impacts several metrics, makes your life a lot easier. And then finally, understanding each team metrics. Like, is there some team that is below expectation in one and one's high? You don't necessarily want to assume that maybe this group is low performers. You want to understand what's going on by asking questions and really getting to the root of the issue, because it may not be what you think or assume it is. So asking questions, really data mining, getting people involved is important. The higher up that you go, the more that you need to understand the corporate landscape. So this is, what does your boss need? What does your boss's boss need? What resources are needed, and from whom? It may not just be from your direct report. It may be from higher up. What are those significant changes coming from above? How's that going to impact your operation? You really want to be involved in some of these key meetings that is going to impact your operation, and understanding how it's going to potentially change your operation so you can get ahead of the change management and communication plan. The more that people know, you may not know all the answers, but the more that you're open and honest and transparent and giving people updates, the better, especially if there's big changes coming from the top down. We talked about being yourself in video 2. And it really becomes important when you're managing the operation, because the operation kind of takes on your own personality. So be yourself. What makes you unique? You want to kind of exude what you're all about. Don't think that you should be a certain way because now you're managing an operation. The more that you're not sort of true to yourself and not aligned to what you're all about, you're going to be communicating that it's not really you, and it's going to affect your staff, and it's going to affect your results. I guarantee it. If mistakes are made, and you're going to make them, as a leader of an operation, you're going to make it. Own the darn mistake and get out there and say, hey, this didn't work. We're going to fix it. Here's how we're going to fix it. It really allows for people to see that you've made a mistake, you're owning it, you're fixing it, and moving on. But when you are really, when you are yourself and you're being aligned with who you truly are, you're setting the tone for that operation. It becomes important because you're creating the culture, the mini culture for your team. You're able to feel the pulse when you're kind of yourself and you're out there and you're talking to your people. You're feeling the pulse of the operation. You can feel if there's a morale issue. You can feel if there's like some sort of anxiety going on in your operation. So, the more that you can just kind of be in tuned and be yourself, you really feel that pulse. And you want to feel the pulse of the operation and create sort of that culture that you want to create. Hopefully it's a positive one, obviously. As a manager in operation, we talked about this. You're accountable. You are responsible for your operations results, period. And avoiding blame, avoiding blame is it's not good at any level, whether you're an individual contributor, a new manager, or higher up. avoid the blame. There's going to be things that maybe you don't think that, that you would have known about. Well, that's going to happen, but don't avoid the blame. If there's a mistake by, the frontline associate or yourself or your manager, you own it. You, just like in the last video, you advise the proper personnel, whether it's your manager or if it's HR, you advise the appropriate people. You fix it, you learn from it, you move on. It's as simple as that. Don't overcomplicate it, and do not, if it's a big one, just like in the last video, do not hide a bad mistake. Oh man, do not hide a bad mistake. Bring in as many people as you can to fix that thing, but do never hide it, because I have seen that go south fast. So if you make a boo-boo, which, if you're managing an operation, there's some great people out there, some great leaders. I guarantee you they've made a mistake. And that's how you learn, but they don't hide it. If you hide something, it'll come out, and then that can lead to termination. So not a good idea. So let's wrap this up in a bow. Some of those key traits we talked about in managing your operation, you're accountable for the whole enchilada now. It's not just one group, it's the whole enchilada. Whatever happens in your operation, you're accountable for it. You're there to develop others, develop your managers, develop your team, really see them succeed, see everybody succeed. You want to have that trust in your managers, in your individual contributors, in yourself. You want to be open and honest and transparent, be a great listener. You want to empower that team and make the decisions and support the decisions. They make mistakes, that's okay. Support them through the mistake, help them fix it, move on. You want to, another key trait, you want to feel the pulse. I can't stress this one enough, and it's a hard one to explain because it's like a feeling. You can feel it when you're going through your operation. You can feel the pulse. You can feel if the operation is productive, if it's engaging, if it's happy, if there's a morale issue, if it's cranky. You can feel it. Another key trait, be proactive. Do not be reactive. This becomes really important the higher up you get. You want to be proactive. Nip problems in the bud. Keep them a molehill so they don't blow up into a mountain. So being proactive and fixing things quickly, seeing things that are potential problems 2 months in advance and fixing it now so it's not a problem becomes really important. Other key traits, you're visionary. You're seeing the vision. You're including people in that vision. You're having them create this sort of vision. Bring in as many people and be as inclusive as possible to create this vision so that there's this buy-in. Understanding your people, your metrics, your data, your processes, and how it's all sort of intertwining with your department, with other departments, with other operations, are some of the other key traits. But really, really what it all comes down to when you're managing that operation, it's really about understanding the big picture. You're understanding your operation, but you're understanding other people's operation, other people's departments. You may not be experts in them, but you're understanding how it's all working together in your organization, and understanding, these different parts that are going on that are all intertwined to make your organization successful. So I hope you've enjoyed our video series on everything management. So being a great manager, how to be a successful new manager, how to be a successful manager of an operation, managing managers. For additional resources or to schedule a session with me, please visit my website at www.yourimpoweredyou.com or email me at bman@yourimpoweredyou.com or give me a ring at 916-633-2555. And I thank you very much and hope you have a very empowered day. Thank you.